What was adopted just 48 hours ago in Paris is not just another chapter in the journey of climate change. It is again the culmination of the better part of 25 years of trying to have the world understand something that first spoke to us through science, was considered at the time by many as science fiction, and yet in less than 2 decades has brought the world together through the IPCC, through the convention, through very arduous negotiations, the ups and downs of the climate process, to an agreement that simply signifies the end, or the beginning of the end, let's put it this way, of the fossil fuel-driven economic era of modern times.
For Kenya to have a wonderful outcome, an outcome that responds to our development needs in agriculture, in trade facilitation, in ICT, right? An LDC package that is tangible, that is deliverable, that's implementable in the short term, right? All those are critically important areas for this country.
Through this symposium, we hope that we'll have an opportunity to hear about concrete solutions to the problems that the private sector face in sub-Saharan Africa and in the world as a whole. And these problems are often related to logistics, related to infrastructure, and to non-tariff barriers to trade. The trade facilitation agreement that was negotiated at Bali and is still in the process of ratification by WTO members is a major platform to help address these issues. And we hope to hear the voice of the private sector here about the importance for developing countries to rapidly ratify the trade facilitation agreement.
As the chief executive of ICTSD in Geneva, TDS is a very important tool or a very important platform to spread the message and the importance of the link between trade policy and sustainable development. This is the first TDS on African soil because it's the first MC on African soil. With 3 days in now, what have you seen that you like?
Well, this has been fantastic for a number of reasons. The first one is that it is really the knowledge platform for excellence on trade policy. When we talk about trade policy, in ICTSD, we're really thinking about the global economy. So being in Africa obviously gives the TDS a content that is relevant to Africa. But it's not all. It is really a conversation that involves everyone.
A broader platform.
Absolutely, and about the global economy. And what it has done, and this is very clear now, is attract by itself participants that are really doing work of excellence with respect to furthering the knowledge on these things from all over the world. So you have the opportunity in Nairobi to really listen to debates that are on the edge. State-of-the-art analysis is really the foremost thinkers in these matters from all over the world again. And that's exciting.
We at ICTSD, since 1996 and the very first ministerial conference, have been presenting or creating this platform for dialogue. We realized from the beginning that there was a need not only to, but very importantly, to engage with a broader range of issues than the narrow negotiating issue of the WTO, but to negotiate and to discuss and to find solutions and to explore with a broader group of stakeholders.
Mentioned policy. ICC, not the International Criminal Court, but International Chamber of Commerce, deals with policy, Stefano. Do we understand or do we find the hurdles too difficult when it comes to policy, when it comes to breaking that ice?
No, policy is critically important. We're a global business organization. We speak for companies all over the world, across sectors, in all geographies. and we were created in 1919 to bring prosperity and peace through world trade. So I think that these lofty objectives that our founding fathers had are still very much true today. And how do we do that? We're trying to bring global business across sectors and across geographies together to construct consensus views on policies or either tools to oil the wheels of trade that we can then bring to governments. And
Tweets coming in thick and fast. I'll read a couple of them just now. Just to remind you, the Twitter handle is @ICTSD. @ICTSD. The hashtag we're using today is TDS Nairobi. So Ruth Wanja, if you're here or wherever you are, he said, and who said trade is boring? Talk of money, business, integration, sustainable development goals. This is where it's happening. Thank you, Ruth. Faith Kamena says, great and mighty business symposium. Peter Bay Kidcard, oh, you say, lively intro by Kwenanga Jeff for plenary debate. Thank you, Peter, wherever you are. Thank you. Vanessa Waitito is echoing what Joaquim said. Get a new map. I like that. Jerry Gishoro says, Africa has great opportunities in trade trajectory. There are hurdles and those can be tackled.
If we are importing 83% of what we need to eat, and most times we don't have the money to buy that food, we have to go, first of all, we worry about food price because we are importing, and then we don't have the money, we go and borrow money, then we worry about the cost of money because we don't have money. Then we worry about the cost of transportation because we don't own the transportation infrastructure. Everything we worry about, everything we ask for others to help finance. The next big thing for me would be the easiest thing to do is for Africa to become self-sufficient in food production.
For us to grow the way you're talking, we need to reinvent our definition of poverty, our definition of development, and our definition of currency. We cannot be using somebody else's map to determine our destination. So you're looking from another person's perspective of what is growth, of what is better, of what is good, and you're using it to judge a whole continent. And for that, our first rat is still a rat. So we are growing in the sense that we are redefining our thought processes. When you're talking about transfer of money, to you it may not be an issue. To that lady in the village whose son sent 1,000 shillings for her to be able to start a small process, that is a livelihood.
The takeaways, especially when I listen to Ali, obviously he talks about we are not growing fast enough. I almost felt like saying, is he a prophet of doom? No, he's not. He wants us to do better, but let's remember, Europe, United States, Asia, all of them started somewhere. A lot of them had to start with small industries. They are where they are today. So for me, what we need to do is set the stage, set the enabling business environment, and let people grow.
I think it's different at different levels. I mean, there were the questions asked about the multilateral level. I mean, the multilateral level is not necessarily an avenue which will allow the private sector a seat around the table. And naturally so, especially if you talk about the WTO, which is a member-driven organization, and members hold very dearly to that construct. I think, however, which was pointed out also by the representative of the ICC, that does not prevent the private sector. On the contrary, the private sector needs to be very clear on its priorities, what it expects from the global community.
UN Development Report came out, the Human Development Index, and it talked about 75% of unpaid work in the world being done by women. So how can trade facilitate the sustainable development goal of gender equality and empowerment?
Should provide a fair return. It doesn't always do, and that's precisely what we have to care about. A lot of the unpaid work is because a lot of women are active in informal activities that are not remunerated, or in household activities that are not remunerated. So the question is, trade provides a remuneration for the work of the woman. And the big question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we make sure this remuneration is a fair remuneration?
We might need to push the gender balance a bit more in favor of the women, but we're getting there.
Well, the first thing we need is to understand what is holding women back from being fully participating in the economy. And the answers are going to be different. So we need to first get the facts and the figures right. Because otherwise we're going to maybe devise these solutions that are not going to respond to the needs on the ground. Facts and figures that come from the ground, analytics, surveys, listen to the women. Informal sector is different from micro. Micro is different from medium. Agro-processing is going to be different from services. So first, let's get this right. Understand what needs to be done. Two, what we need is a concerted effort from governments, from trade and investment support institutions, and from the women in business, and from the men in business, because this is a conversation that needs to bring men and women together to adopt plans of action. I'm very fond of getting clear objectives, measurable objectives, objectives that at the end of the day we can check to see if we are moving in the right direction or not. But it's got to do with market intelligence. It's got to do with improving the competitiveness of these women. It's got to do with quality standards. It's got to do with credit, access to credit. There is no credit, women cannot be thriving in trade. Trade is fundamentally driven through credit. Credit, by the way, which is pretty safe, is the safest form of credit, so it should not be a problem. Final point should be about connecting women to markets. No market, it's very difficult to then have a business.
How much of what we know is going down to them and what tools are available, and involving women, youth and people with disabilities. I think trickling the information down and seeing how we can access these markets, because it seems the opportunities are there, the information is there, but what we're not very good at is passing on the information, communicating it in a way that they can understand. So what I heard, especially from ITC, is the information is vast and it's available. It's packaging it, networking to be able to lift each other up. I think another thing that I heard that was very important is about listening to what the new technologies are available. Do our women know this? And what I also had is that a lot of technologies coming from the young people, they easily adopt those technologies. So it's mixing with different people, getting a diverse group of people together and just collaborating a lot. The procurement portal that is available, I think that's a quick win for our association. We can quickly put it on our network Inform and people can use that. The She Trades app, that is something that is very quick and people can put it online. Mentoring program, are there other people we should be looking or talking to who can feed into our group? So there's a lot of good things. I think it's just, let's act, let's do it. The markets are ready.
What is stopping us from doing what we already know? I think we need to challenge ourselves as Africans and start looking at why we are not getting further. We have been talking about intra-African trade. I know that, of course, it's very expensive. We need to all look at infrastructure. This, we have started talking about it for a long time. I think the time for talk in Africa is now over. We want to see action. And our partners, the Western, have been here. We are talking. I think this is a very good start, that people are talking with one another. We have time to discuss, to talk. But we want to tell them, and we want to tell our partners from the Western world that we are ready to do business. What we want to do is to partner with you. And we want to do a win-win situation. We want to win together. It's only Africa which is growing at a higher rate economically. And also, our population is rising day by day. We know that by the end of this century, Africa is going to constitute 40% of the population of the world. So this is where the market is. So we are calling our Western partners, come and invest. We want to facilitate your investment. We want to discuss those issues and we invest together. And I'm sure this is the way forward for all.
comprehensive single FTA was envisaged. During the clarification of the negotiating principles, this tripartite initiative was redirected, and it will do anything but solve the problem of overlapping membership. So the clarification of the negotiating principles becomes extremely important in terms of mapping the pathway to a comprehensive FTA that can solve the challenges that have been articulated in this context. So extremely important. A lot of debate, discussion, analysis needs to be done now to alert not only our negotiators, but also our politicians, those who can be the champions of the kind of FTA that Africa really needs.
Well, immediately, as I say, the issue is that there would appear to be a general political will that we need governance in trade. One of the key reasons is because I think countries in Africa recognize that trade is far more constructive than aid per se. And secondly, it also underpins sustainable development and also their own political sovereignty in the matter. That's one aspect. The second aspect, which is the back-to-back on the dispute and administration, is that Africa is putting more and more instruments and institutions in place that underpin its desire to be recognized as a sovereign region, a region with several sovereign states here, and that we are quite capable of resolving and addressing the challenges that arise here. Thirdly, though, is the recognition, and the very realistic recognition, of the challenges and the challenge of capacity, the challenge of infrastructure, the challenge, I mean, South Africa's got all these things, we can say, and yet it seems to have one of the longest periods to get anything up out of the ports. I would say immediately we need to implement some of the rules that already have been shared and are recognized as critical for implementation. Don't just wait until we sign, start implementing beforehand.
Does trade have anything with climate change? Of course, yes, because any trade transaction has some production processes behind it, and these production processes are associated with emissions, and that has implications for climate change. That's the question, and there has been a study by IPCC which says economy-wise there are a number of activities responsible for climate change in different ways. For example, the production of electricity, for example, accounts for 25% of total global emissions. Agriculture in the second place, 24%. Transport, 14%. Industry, 21% accounts for global emissions. So there are different types of economic activities that have implications on climate change. They influence climate change differently. Also, the impact of trade in climate change is depends on basically three factors. One is the scale of economic operations, the scale of output, business, and so on. The second is composition of trade. What area are we focusing on? Some of the sectors are more energy intensive, some others are less so. So the composition of sectors is important. And finally, the technique is important. Which techniques are you applying in the production process?
The WTO is happening, and our meeting is going to help to put some perspectives. Illegal trade certainly, definitely undermines that very good trade that has a lot of money. And if you're thinking about Kenya, we know that Kenya is known, for being a pioneer in many areas. Whether we are looking at cut flowers, or we are looking at tea, or whether we are looking at coffee. I hope you have had some coffee just outside the door here. But I think what really comes to mind when you talk about Kenya to many people, athletes and the wildlife.
Well, the exploitation of natural resources, whether it's biodiversity loss, whether it is animals, that is being taken to other countries in terms of ivory or whatever, or even exploitation of minerals. This has led to something called illicit trade flows. And a lot of money, there's a lot of capital flight. That is money that is leaving this continent to other continents or to other countries. Money that would have otherwise been used to develop or in development planning, so to speak. So what we want is holistic approach to natural resource management, whether it be oil, because that's part of natural resources, whether it be energy, because that's part of our natural resources like hydroelectricity and so on and so forth. That money be used to develop this continent. Otherwise, we would not be having any discussions. But there have been a lot of things that are coming out in terms of wildlife, in terms of all these other things. But generally, what we are saying is that there's legislation that has been put in place to be effected, enforcement of legislation.
Today that I've learned that bilaterals and multilaterals are essential, but also the WTO is essential. As a number of the speakers mentioned, it's a level playing field, and I think even a country as successful in negotiating deals like Australia needs to look at the international field very, very closely, needs to ensure that they're part of all of those agreements. That is the world, that is the majority of the countries in the world, and we need to have a stable and calm and agreeing world that works together.
No, I think, you know, the number of issues that have been raised since the beginning of the TDS, a number of them will certainly take forward. I was earlier the first plenary of the E15 with Minister Plumman, etc., about the global trade and development. This is really a key issue. The other one, I think, is the whole debate about the mega regionals and everything that's happening outside the system, and how do you at the same time make sure that you don't have a conflict between a global governance architecture and people want to move because the life goes on. So to me, you have very broad issues like this, and you also have very specific issues. I was just discussing local content. This is something that speaks directly to the extractive sector, and this is absolutely at the heart of what, for instance, the African continent is discussing. So to me, you have two horizontal debates that has to go on, but also we have to make sure that some of the sectoral issues that are being discussed here, climate change, extractives, now there is one on natural resources and trade, financing for development, that those lessons that come out of there get mainstreamed into the broader discussion that is also happening next door WTO.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here today, and thanks a lot for those kind words. I guess at Trademark East Africa, we're set up as a special purpose vehicle, really, to try to support trade development. And as Gabriel said, we do a lot of work in partnership with the African Bank, the World Bank. I feel like I'm in the middle of my two partners here. But essentially, what we aim to do is try to be your flexible friend in between to help things happen quickly. But also, as Gabriel said, to do the soft side. You can build a border post, but what good is a border post? It's a building, it may be an improved road, but unless that border post is operated efficiently, it doesn't have any payoff. So I think mixing the soft side with the hard side is really important. So without getting border authorities to really do their thing properly and automate that process.
Now, I do believe that for regional integration to happen, it needs to be, led by one or two or three governments that are very committed to the integration process. It needs to be strongly anchored in the private sector, because the private sector will hold accountable the public sector and will push for progress. It also needs sometimes to focus on simple things in the beginning to be able to show success. And last but not least, I think it needs to embody an element of flexibility, because sometimes some countries are able to move at a faster pace than others, but once they move and they achieve progress, others can see the benefits of it and they may want to join.
National markets, therefore, are too small to justify huge amount of investment We all talk about infrastructure challenges in Africa. We need infrastructure. No country in the world developed, industrialized, have their infrastructure because others came to pay for them. So it's very important that we have enough market, we have integration to justify, to attract investment so that we can actually have our infrastructure developed.
I think 2 or 3 takeaways very quickly. One is, yes, infrastructure is important for integration. That's the hardware, roads, power, ICT and so on. But you need the software, the rules, regulations, the systems and so on. And I think unless these two complement one another, it is not going to happen.
To me, the most important takeaway is that Africa needs to reduce trade costs. Today, trade costs in Africa are 50% higher than those in East Asia. Actually, intra-African trade costs are the highest in the developing world. So to make progress on the dream of integration, we need to reduce trade costs. All right.
Is there anything else we want to add?
No, I think this is fine.
Yeah, I would like to encourage more and more the people I know to come and participate in this event, to explore more opportunities and also hear what other people say about Africa, how Africa will grow.
I think there has to be more flexibility. I think there has to be a willingness to engage with creative and innovative solutions, because we can't keep repeating the same thing and expecting different results. On the African continent, speaking about African countries ourselves, trade integration is huge and necessary. Trade facilitation is essential. You just talked about some of the issues, ease of doing business around the continent. It's much easier. You go into the EU for business, you need 1 visa and then 27 countries. But you come to Africa, every country you need a visa, most countries. Some countries are trying to do visa on entry, and then you have the regional blocks. But I think the AU is trying to take steps. The Continental Free Trade Area negotiations are on, and we really need to politically engage and make sure that it's a reality strategically to improve the lives of people. Really, it's about improving lives and poverty alleviation. It's a serious, we need the political will.
Non-tariff barriers are becoming the fashion of making it difficult to do trade across the world. People don't, put tariffs up. They just make it inconvenient for you to do business. And then you don't need to go very far. Within our own borders of East Africa, a truck stays there for 1 day, 2 days. As a non-tariff barrier, somebody will say, well, why do I do business in this country, or why shouldn't I just go somewhere else? So I think for selected products, of course, there are certain tariffs, if for nothing else, to make sure that governments collect revenues. But as East Africa alone, we have reduced our tariff bands to only 3. 0 for raw materials, if you are manufacturing, 10% for intermediate products, and 25% for finished products. Those are the tariffs that were only those 3 bands. There used to be hundreds, many years back. And so those are ways of actually making sure that people understand, easy for people to do business, and transparent for everybody to have clarity.
What's happened is that the regional banks are now realizing they have to take a leadership role. In the past, we relied a lot more on other banks, maybe foreign banks who had a bigger presence. But now the regional banks from East Africa, especially Kenya, have decided that you have to create a leadership role as banks. And we've even seen other banks, like Tanzanian banks, CRB, now opening up in Burundi. So we are seeing it becoming our trend of more banks thinking that they should open up the trade flows, payment flows, and also credit for the region.
The key bottlenecks that hamper intra-regional integration, intra-regional trade, have so much to do with the policy-related constraints. And to hear the political commitment from the EAC, especially in pushing forward, removing the barriers, making it feasible to identify resources to make the necessary investments on infrastructure and especially on transport, I think is one clear indication that once there is political will and commitment, things work.
So